We had minutes from the last meeting, which was April 7th. Did you have a chance to review those? Do you have any additions or corrections?
No, I make a motion to approve the minutes as written.
I second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, anyone opposed? Okay, we have two ordinances on the agenda this evening, dealing with the Alto Homes TIF. So Melissa, if you could please read the title of the first ordinance.
An ordinance creating the Alto Ryan Homes Tax Increment Financing Incentive Districts, declaring improvements to the parcels within each incentive district to be a public purpose and exempt from real property taxation, requiring the owners of those parcels to make services payments in lieu of taxes, establishing a municipal public improvement tax increment equivalent fund for the deposit of those service payments, requiring the distribution of a portion of those service payments to the Circleville City School District and the Pigway Ross Career and Technology Center, specifying the public infrastructure improvements that benefit or serve parcels in the incentive districts, approving a tax increment financing agreement with the developer of the incentive districts, and declaring an emergency.
Okay, thank you. We have our P3 director here this evening, as well as Tim Colburn, as well as Ryan Scribner. We just discussed this in terms of the community reinvestment area with the Alto development, and this is tax increment financing districts that we are establishing. Could you tell us a little bit about the difference between those two?
Sure. Good news is there's a parallel, right? So
Yes.
we had a tax abatement district and we have a TIF district. So the TIF district, it parallels the tax abatement district. It is the municipal boundaries of the city. First thing you have to do to use a TIF is establish a district, and that's what your first piece of legislation. Tax increment financing takes your base tax value of a property today, locks it in. As it improves over time, you have the change in value. That change in value is the increment, and we're able to deploy that increment for economic development purposes. I'm going to pause there, stop there. Ryan's a subject matter expert. He's got his PhD in this. He can go into more details with you, but it is a strategic tool to be used, pulled out of the toolbox by city council when necessary. And we talked in the previous committee meeting that we have infrastructure needs, thoroughfare plan, and stormwater to deploy tax dollars to help the developer with those costs. And that is the solution we brought TIF district and the TIF parcel to bear for this evening's.
Thank you, Tim. I've got to amend my business cards and add that PhD after my name. No one would take that serious, I promise you that. Yes, I was laughing the hardest. So, yeah, thank you, Tim. And maybe just a couple more words about TIF, and then some specifics about the provision or the legislation that's in front of you now. We've already kind of talked about in the last committee hearing that you all were here for, some extraordinary costs associated with making development possible at this property. And in fact, the two TIF agreements in front of you tonight speak to actually less than half of the total public infrastructure investment that will be needed to be made by the developers to, again, solve those long-standing, decades-old drainage issues, to connect those thoroughfares, provide safe ingress and egress and access for the residents in the new development and the residents around it. What you have in front of you is, again, the product of lengthy discussion and negotiation. And it represents an opportunity for partnership, in that the developer is going to build these improvements as specified by the city and is going to receive partial reimbursement for those investments over time. The way that TIF works, it does capture those increments of new property tax revenue generated by the development. What it doesn't do is raise anyone else's taxes as far as surrounding properties. They're held harmless. They're not affected by this in any way. I heard comments in one of our prior meetings, people worried about implications that this could have on their taxes. This doesn't affect any other residents' taxes. It doesn't raise the taxes of the new residents in this new community. What TIF does to me is it diverts that normal stream of when you're paying your property tax dollars, there's places it goes. The city gets a little bit, the schools get a lot, the county gets some, and there's other entities that receive property tax dollars in the absence of a TIF. What the TIF does is, for an agreed upon time and percentage, it collects those new property tax dollars generated by the new investments made by Alto and their development partners, and it allows for that strategic deployment of those into public infrastructure that supports the new development and makes it viable and possible. For this agreement, the first piece of legislation in front of you, it's specific to the single family homes development. And within the multiple pages of legislation, there is a description of those public improvements that are allowed for and provided for. Again, you'll see stormwater, you'll see retention, you'll see Georgia Road, Atwater Road, and you'll see some dollar figures associated with that. I believe around
Close to $2.5 million.
close to $2.5 million, correct. Again, which is just a portion of what the total cost is. I don't want anyone to lose sight of the fact that the developer is making up a big delta above and beyond that dollar figure, provided for within the TIF legislation. It's also important to note that this is what we, in layman's terms, in the development community, we would call a non-school TIF, meaning that we're not taking of that new increment of new property tax revenue that's being diverted into the TIF fund to help reimburse the developer for these investments. We're not taking into the school share of that revenue. The schools are made whole essentially with those payments that will be made in lieu of taxes to the school districts, equivalent to what they would normally get. And that was critically important for Circleville City Schools and their school board members and their superintendent and treasurer who are part of those deliberations and negotiations back and forth. And that, they were going to have the resources they needed. And so again, there's a lot of math that goes into figuring out, well, can we provide for that and make the schools whole while still generating enough money to partially offset these costs? And we feel like we've hit that sweet spot. So TIF is a powerful tool. It's used every day all over Ohio. We've done a whole lot of them, even here in Pickaway County, for other residential developments in other communities, certainly for industrial development to help make things possible that wouldn't otherwise be. And that's what we're doing this evening. So again, glad to answer any questions and certainly appreciate the consideration the city is giving for this scenario.
Just for everybody's memory, I believe the connector off of South Court Street was a TIF project. The connector off of South Court Street was a TIF project.
Yes.
Yes.
Progress Parkway
Yes.
is a TIF project, lighting throughout the Casto RCA Thompson site.
So we have past history of having TIFs in the city. Yeah.
One point I want to make before we move on. So Ryan talked about keeping the schools whole. And so you have all your participants in property tax millage, right? Circleville Schools, Pickaway Ross, your health, not health department, developmental disabilities, all these folks, but the county has a share. We, when we do a city TIF, have to go have a conversation with the county. We either get their permission or denial. They accepted this. They are basically saying, Circleville, for this development, use the county share to make city improvements. Oh, and by the way, the city's in the county. So just know your county commissioners supported this. I made this comment in the prior committee meeting. This will be on a one case-by-case basis. If we identify stormwater and thoroughfare plans or other improvements needed, we will go talk to the county commissioners and other stakeholders to negotiate an appropriate TIF agreement. This will not be, we won't be able to take everybody's millage all the time. This will be on a case-by-case basis.
So just as a hypothetical, if someone came and wanted to build a housing community, but they're just going to put in a cul-de-sac, that would be very different than establishing these thoroughfares with Atwater and Georgia Road.
Internal development is an expectation in the development community to do themselves to sustain that through their own economics.
Yes.
When you are building thoroughfares or taking up developable acreage because we have a thoroughfare payment or we have water retention issues, that's why we're pulling TIF to the forefront here.
Yes. So not everybody, a developer that comes through can expect to have these credits given.
Case-by-case basis with matters that warrant attention and that would be supported by city administration and city elected officials.
John?
Can you just help me understand the basis of when you say you capture the tax and then the increments that, or the improvements are what the TIF's generated off of. So where do you capture it? And then how do you keep track of the increments of improvement?
Well, we'll take a crack at this, John, because this is something that the city auditor and the county auditor capture through their property tax processes twice a year.
Okay.
But basically take an elevator, first floor, that's where
Yeah.
your property taxes are today. You put up new houses and you build out 25% of them. You go to from the first floor to the second floor. The difference between the first floor and the second floor is the first increment. I wouldn't establish that value. The county auditor hires appraisers. The appraisers go out and look at the properties. They put them on the county's books. And now you have a different tax value that on the second floor than you did the first floor. And it continues as the houses build out or as the apartment units build out. So you get that
Each assessment that they do is what you base it off of.
basically July and February or whenever his Brad Washburn's cycle is,
Right.
would establish those. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
And we have 3 districts here. I assume this is the 3 phases that these homes will go through, that the tax increments will be based on.
Correct. Phasing plan is consistent with the districts that are identified within the TIF.
Do you have any questions?
Appreciate your explanation of TIF and whoever does the website for the city to do a video link to that explanation, because I'm sure you get lots of questions. What's a TIF? But how you describe, both of you, how you described how that will be implemented, because I think that will really help with many of the people who showed up at the hearings, to better understand it. So great job.
Ryan's going to try to trend out there on TikTok and make some money off those videos.
With a PhD, you should be
Yeah,
able to.
absolutely.
Sorry.
Not sure the tip's going to
Thank
be
you.
real clickbait. Oh, goodness.
I would add just one last comment, not to overcook it, but what I really appreciated about TIF in particular, not just working for private developers now, but when I was working more for the public sector, if you've ever heard the phrase performance-based incentives, it truly is that. Because guess what? We can all agree to all this stuff. If these guys aren't successful in executing on building the city's infrastructure to their standards, then the city's not going to accept it. It'll have to be inspected and ensure that it's built to the specifications that the city wants. So if they don't do that, and then if they're not successful in partnering with their builders to get the product developed and get those residents in there, they never get a penny back. So they're taking on a lot of risk to spend these millions of dollars up front to do all these things, and then they have to perform. And if they don't, that's on them. It's not on the city. So again, it's this give and take of support and some trust, and then they got to execute and perform. The pressure is on them, not on the community. And particularly in this example where the city's not, in some cases, communities will make these types of investments proactively on their own. And in doing so, they assume risk that maybe these guys won't perform. In this case, all the risk is being transferred over here and kind of away from the city.
We appreciate that. And, just to note also that all of these investment tools, the community reinvestment area and the tax increment financing, that's all part of our strategic plan that the Montrose, company did for us, and tools that we need to be using as a city.
Also, will say this property, along with others coming down the pike, will be a part of the NCA as well,
Yes.
which we'll talk about later this summer.
So that will also help support the infrastructure that will be needed and city services and all of the things that come with the increased population that we will have. So they will be giving back. I know there's a lot of fear that it's going to, place an undue burden on the city, but we've put a lot of things in place with legislation in the administration that should pay off in the long run.
To that point, and maybe this is a point that we should have made when we were talking about the CRA agreement, through every step of this, the city's been very diligent in making sure that they were looking out not just for trying to appease a developer, but looking out for their short and long-term needs. So for example, within the CRA agreement, which isn't before you now, we've already talked about it, that was structured in a way that preserves 100% of the city's income tax revenue. There's many, many other CRA agreements that we've been a part of over time that included the need for, in some cases, for the city to be sharing half of their new income tax revenue from new development. In this case, the city's been able to preserve all of that. There hasn't been any other development like this before that's also contemplated layering not only full share of their income tax revenue, but then that extra increment of NCA revenue that isn't before you tonight, but will be. They've already taken the steps to initiate that and to comply and to be a part of the NCA. And then again, the utility of the TIF with the developer building the city's infrastructure at their risk. So this is a good deal for the city and a good deal for Alto.
And will not affect any of the existing property taxes for people who already live here at all. So
Not
will
at
not
all.
affect existing residents.
Correct.
One other piece about the TIF is, so we're using half of that or a little bit less than half of that to help the developer over time. Well, that means there's a partial portion left for the city to deploy through the strategic plan, through city administration to solve other infrastructure challenges, be it roads or safety forces, could be viewed as a supporting element to the city. And I would encourage the city to begin to, as the TIF dollars begin to get banked up, to make sure you're considering that as a new tool or a new resource for you.
Yes, excellent. And I also want to mention that we will have the Tax Incentive Review Council that will be watching this, and Mr. Colburn will be in charge of that, making sure it's all in line each year and reporting back to the city and all the investors. Are there any other questions, comments from other council members?
I have a question. This property there that we're looking at to move forward and so on, obviously it's a gamble. When we go to purchase that land and so on, is that always going to be taken care of and purchased, or is there a certain agreement that goes along with the purchase of the property from the original owners?
I apologize. I'm not sure.
Oh, no. Okay, so the property's for sale, been out there for 10 years and so on. Does the developer purchase the land first, or is there an agreement that says if this doesn't go through, then property reverts back to the original owner?
Want to speak to that?
Sure. Patrick Fisher with Alto. We've purchased the 34 acres. The balance of the 25 acres we are in contract on, and that is contingent upon getting these incentives. If they don't happen, we can't move forward. That's simple as that.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Okay.
I appreciate that.
Anything else?
Thank you.
Make a
Any
motion.
questions, just any questions from anyone in the audience that would like to ask about this? No? Okay, I
Make a
will-
motion to bring this forward to the council on May 20th
with a recommendation for passage?
with a recommendation for passage.
I'll second.
Okay, thank you. Roll call, please.
Tice,
Yes.
Moats,
Yes.
Lukasak.
Yes.
Okay, motion carries. And we have an accompanying ordinance. Melissa, would you please read the title?
An ordinance declaring the improvements of certain parcels in the city to be a public purpose and exempt from taxation pursuant to ORC 5709.40B, requiring the owners of those parcels to make service payments in lieu of taxes, establishing a municipal public improvement tax increment equivalent fund for the deposit of those service payments, requiring the distribution of a portion of those service payments to the Circleville City School District and the Pickway Ross Career and Technology Center, specifying the public infrastructure improvements that directly benefit the parcels, approving a tax increment financing agreement, and declaring an emergency.
Thank you. Would you like to speak to this, Brian?
Thank you. So you've got a couple different TIFs, a couple different types of TIFs, because you have a couple different types of development. The single family product and then the commercial multifamily product. This is for the commercial multifamily product. We already talked in the prior meeting about a 15-year, 75% CRA, which will abate a portion of the tax liabilities during that period of time for 15 years. What the TIF will do, kind of overlapping that or an overlay to that, it'll capture the non-school portion of new tax revenue that 25% that isn't abated during years 1 through 15. And then in years 16 through 30, you'll capture the full increment of non-school revenue to be applied to the same solutions and problems that we've already discussed this evening. You might note that in the attachments where it describes the improvements, a little shorter list of improvements, and then I think it just speaks to Atwater and some stormwater, not Georgia Road, because Georgia Road's over on the other side of the property or the development area. It's also a much smaller dollar figure. The other agreement was for 2.35 million. I think this one here is more for like 350,000. Give or take. So smaller increment to work with, not as many improvements that we're relying on this portion of the property to fund, but nonetheless, just as important to the broader package in the deal that was struck, in negotiation with the developers. So.
Perfect. So it's basically the same thing, but not for the single-family homes. This is for the apartments with AB Contracting.
Correct.
Do you have any questions or thoughts?
I do not.
President Keller or any other council members?
No, thank you.
Okay, hearing none, I will entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to move this forward to council meeting on the 20th with recommendation for passage.
Audrey, would you second?
Yeah.
Okay. Please do a roll call.
Price,
Yes.
Moats,
Yes.
Lukastak.
Yes.
Okay, motion carries. Thank you very much, and thank you, gentlemen, for being here to help explain this complex tool that we have in our toolbox.
Thank you.
Do we have any new business otherwise? Okay,
Motion to adjourn.
okay, we have a motion to adjourn from Audrey.
I'll second that.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, thank you so much. Council will start in just about 7 minutes,
Council will start at 7 PM.
7 p.m. Thank you.